All right. So I guess to begin, let's just start with like your full name, and then we'll go from there.
My full name is William John Thomas IV, but I go by Bill.
Okay. And then the previous position you held in the military.
I was enlisted in the United States Air Force.
Okay. And then when did you serve and some of the places that you served?
I served from 1960 until 1964. I was after basic training in Lackland Air Force Base in Texas. I went to Plattsburgh Air Force Base in upstate New York. There they had the B-47 bomber and the KC-97 aerial tanker. Was there for a year and then went to Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, which was a B-52 unit, and served there for almost 3 years.
Okay. All right. Let's see. All right. So first question, where did you go after leaving the military?
Came back here to home. I was born and raised in this area and spent basically my entire life. But I stayed in the Air Force for active duty for 4 years and in active reserve for 2 years. During that period, I talked to some people at what is now Joint Base Andrews about joining a group down there, and they were very enthusiastic, but it never went through. So.
And then what made you interested in joining the American Legion after your service?
Because I knew many, many members of the post from this neighborhood. It's interesting because in the beginning, when I first got out, I was not eligible because the criteria for membership was different at that time in the middle 60s. There was a very tight area. Since that time, they changed it to broaden the range of time when a member can be in the American Legion. Been in the Legion for 37 years.
Wow. So wait, how did they change the qualifications? Like, what were they originally?
The Vietnam era was very tight, and I got out just before then, and the end of the Korean War period was before that. So there was a gap that was not eligible for membership. Then the Legion, I think very wisely, changed it and just opened it from Pearl Harbor to modern time. So anybody that served in any branch of the military is eligible for membership.
Okay. So then what are some of your favorite things that you've done with the American Legion?
I've assisted with the color guard some years ago. I did that in the military. I was in a military honor guard. And before that in yours and my scout troop, we had a color guard that marched a lot. But I was in a drum and bugle corps. I was a bugler, played taps more times than I can imagine. And it, like I say, it was a great experience.
Yeah. So then how do you feel like your role in the American Legion is a continuation of your service to your country and to your community?
It is as a member of the organization. The American Legion is a service to our country and to our veterans. Currently, I'm the judge advocate in the post. I've read the manual and learned the terminology. Basically, it serves as the parliamentarian of the body, which is something I'm very familiar with from other organizations. But it's not any kind of judge kind of activities. It's keeping track of the rules being followed.
Okay. And what would you tell someone who may be interested in joining Post 68?
Telling them that joining the American Legion is a privilege, and that Post 68 has a great long history. It's too bad that there aren't more active members. We have over 100 members, but as Jackson knows, when we have a meeting there's only less than a dozen. And that's too bad. But they're still members, and every member is equal.
Yeah. I guess, and other interviews may have touched this already. Can you tell me a little bit more about what your meetings are like, how often you meet, and what you do with them?
we meet once a month in the basement of the Salem Methodist Church in Brookville, and there is opening ceremonies which are military in nature. That's a salute to the flag and a repeat of the Constitution of the Pledge of Allegiance of the Legion, which is another document. And then there's business, the post awards scholarships, the post awards membership at the, what's the name of the school where?
Sherwood.
No, I know that. No, Boys State.
Boys State.
Boys State is sponsored, and it's where a scout can go, or any young man can go to learn leadership characteristics and coordination, cooperation.
All right. And then, are there any stories that you would like to share, I guess, about your time in the Legion or your time in the military?
I don't think we've got enough time. Okay. But in the service, as I said, I was in combat intelligence, which means that I provided support to Air Force bomber units. When the bombers would go, they would carry a black bag with them, and in that black bag was the war plan, what they should do if the time came. And my unit, my vault, was where we prepared those combat mission folders. And I would prepare them, and there would be duplicates. One would be on the aircraft, the other would be back in the shop. So we had changes, we made the changes, and then went and traded to the crew the updated combat mission folder. One story I remember, we had an aircraft that had landed overseas because of maintenance. And because of that, they were there more than 24 hours, and the law said that when they came back, they had to clear customs, even though they were a military unit. So our unit came back, and we're out on the runway waiting for them. And I looked over, and there were two guys to the side that were in civilian clothes. So I asked the combat support group, air policeman, who they? He said, they're from customs. I told him, I said, well, they can't look at my stuff. He said, don't worry about it. So the crew came down, and they unloaded with this big orange footlocker, and in it was our black briefcase and other things in there. And as they brought it down and opened it, these two guys started to walk forward, and the AP stood up in front of them with an automatic weapon and said, no, sir. He said, no, sir, you don't get to look at that. And they didn't, and they walked away. I never had the opportunity to fly in a bomber, but I've crawled through them many, many times and seen them fly. The B-52 is huge, and it carries nuclear weapons, and the newer ones carry air-to-ground missiles. So it was a great experience. We have lost them over the years, none from my unit, but there have been cases. When I was in New York, we had a B-52 who was on a training mission in northwestern New York, and he was coming back, and all the red lights came on, and the aircraft commander says, okay, everybody out. So they all bailed out, and the bomber kept on flying across Lake Champlain, finally crashed into a mountain. All these guys came down at nighttime. Well, one of them was never found. One of them, he walked out of the woods and climbed into one of the trucks, so the rescue unit started blowing a horn. The sad one was the radar nav, which is one of the 6-member crew, came down in a tree. This is at night, and he's hanging by his parachute shrouds, up there. He's cool, I'm down. He pulls out his knife, cuts them all, and drops. He was in the top of a 100-foot pine, so he fell 75 feet further to the ground and fractured his pelvis. If he just stayed there, they could have gotten him down safely. The B-47 was a 6-engine bomber, and the KC-97s were prop aircrafts that were air refueling, and they did that. The B-52 used a KC-135, which is a 6-jet air tanker. It's a big bird too. I worked with the, you may have heard in the news, there had been a little bit of what's called Project Blue Book. In the Air Force, Project Blue Book, which has now been shut down, was or is the UFO project. It was a requirement for every Air Force installation in the world to have a representative of Project Blue Book. My boss, Major Bill Lane, was the one at our base. And he said, "Here, Thomas, take care of this." So I was. And in 3 years, I only make one report. That was a lady that near the base that said she saw a UFO. And I went and interviewed her. And we determined that there was on the coast, the Gulf of Mexico, there was an anti-aircraft missile battery. And we were able to determine within minutes of the time she said she saw a UFO, there'd been a launch from that anti-aircraft battery in their regular procedures. And that's what she saw. So we were able to clear that one from all the other neat stories that people talk about UFOs.
All right. Are there any stories from your time in the Legion that you'd like to mention?
Well, we do, as we still do, at Memorial Day, do a visitation where we go to seven different cemeteries. Now, I haven't done that for a while, but we go and with the Scouts, and we'll provide a memorial service. And one of them is in Ashton, near here, at a private burial site of one of the members of the post from long ago. And his son, his grandson, Dave, and I are the same age. He's passed away. But his father, David, was in the Legion and at one time ran for national commander of the American Legion and came in second. But we visited all these cemeteries, and usually a troop bugler would play taps. There were, as many times, it was me. I played taps as a scout in 264, and then at Sherwood, and then when I went to college, and then in the service. So, like I say, I got it right most time. But the Legion, it's the fellowship, telling war stories, whether they're peaceful or war. One of our members, Paul Fowler, who you know, is an officer at a higher level in the Legion. He's a judge advocate for the 8th District. Same kind of job. And we're a part of the national structure.
Okay. All right. I think that's all the questions I have. So thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. And thank you for all you've done, and you too, brother. I'm looking forward to your award.
Thank you. Yeah.
Now, my question is, are we off?
No.
Oh, you keep going?
I mean, I think we're only 16 minutes in if you want to talk about anything else.
Okay, well, I got a question. What's the badge up under your collar, the blue one?
This one?
No, up under your collar there.
Under this one right here.
Yeah.
I think it's the International Scout symbol.
Yeah.
We ended up getting those, gosh, when you guys were Cub Scouts, I didn't know what that was. It's been so many years.
It's been so long. It's been on my uniform this entire time, I guess.
As I said about my son, he went to Outward Bound in Maine. And now it's more than 20 years ago. And he went to Good Counsel. And he was in I guess it was in 264. But anyway, they went to Maine, and when they pushed off from the wharf, no contact, no phones, no radios, no nothing. And it was for a week, maybe 2 weeks. And like I say, that's part of the stuff that he learned. And then later on, and from the University of Virginia Tech, he was a forest ranger in Colorado, and then he came back east and was a park ranger in upstate New York. They're different. Forest rangers come under the Department of Agriculture, and park rangers come under the Department of some other government agency. But he did that. And 264, we met in the basement of St. John's Church the building there that's the hall now. When they built it, they built the basement, only the basement, so that it was like this high off the ground with tar and chip roof. And downstairs, there's a big meeting room and then a bunch of small meeting rooms. And we did a lot of camping. We did not do anything like Outward Bound. My son was in, big son, older son, was in Scouts for a little while. And I said, when I got out of Boy Scouts, I'm never going to sleep on the ground on purpose again. But they were going to have a father-son camping trip. And they went to Camp Roosevelt, which was down on the Chesapeake Bay, on the western shore of the bay. I don't know what's there now. But we went down there, and they gave me a two-man tent by myself, and I was sitting beside the fire pit overhead, and I'd found this piece of wood. And I was sitting there with my knife, and I was carving notches and rings on it. And one of the scouts came over and said, "Mr. Thomas, what's that?" This is a possum whopper." "Oh, what?" "It's a possum whopper." "What's that?" I said, "Well, when you're asleep at night in your tent, and some little possum might come and want to met." I slept so well that night, nothing bothered me. We went to camp, not Wilson. Wilson's in Virginia. There was another one. It was a beautiful camp with a lake. And we remember good trips there, and a lot of places around here. We went to Appalachian Trail in Pennsylvania. We went to the one down in Virginia now that you got a waiting list, Old Rag Mountain. You got to sign up to go up there. There's so many people want to go. But we went up and across and over, and there was a shelter that there were two people already in it. So we pitched camp right beside it. We did on the Appalachian Trail in Pennsylvania in a trail cabin, which was a big time operation. Didn't have electricity, but it was a huge 2.5-story cabin. And so we were there, and and they told us we're going to have guests for dinner. And we said, "Yeah, what?" Said, "A Girl Scout troop." We said, "Yuck." Said, "No, it's a senior Girl Scout." "Oh, okay." So they came walking up, and one of them was carrying a phonograph. There's no electricity in the cabin. So anyway, we had dinner, and great dinner. And then we did some kind of game. It was like forfeits or 20 questions or something, and it was couples. So they sent the first couple out to look for a round rock. Sent the next two couples out to look for the first couple. We were in lots of parades. And like I say, we had our color guard that would be usually by ourselves. We wouldn't have a marching unit. And